Um, Picture of Mount Everest coming behind the clouds here. And there are designs painted onto these rocks. Basically, those are prayers. This is called like a prayer mountain, where people would have a wish and they'll put signs on these, paint these signs on the rocks. And well, that's what that is. So, and then I made this black and white print. So in order for the black and white print to work, I had to convert the colors into a specific tonal value that would separate from its adjacent colors and objects. A lot of times when you convert color to black and white, it just looks flat and it doesn't work. So it's the local contrast. Again, you'll notice here the increased contrast compared to the color. And without that kind of treatment, a black and white print would not work. So I'm going to back so you can see this side by side. And so I took the original color transparency, made a black and white neg. And you have to keep in mind now, everything that I've taught in the past lessons are used. So there's masking, there's film masking involved. In order to understand film masking, you have to understand how to design a negative that black and white paper will respond well to. So it would really help if you watched the other video prior to trying to understand this one. Now this is in Cambodia, shot by Annie, and it's a graveyard. These are gravestones, markers, and so this is the color print. And then I made a black and white print. And again, it looks different, but they both work. What's most interesting is that when I made this, I felt it was a real challenge because of all the detail inside here. I mean, it looks probably on the camera, you can't see, but I actually pulled it out with film masking. So this is how to make a fine black and white print from a color transparency, not just a black and white print. Quickly, I'll go through these. This is in China. I think this is where they did Avatar, where they filmed the movie Avatar. These mountains in China, they look like they're floating in the clouds. Color, black and white. Again by Annie and Shu. This is rice fields in China. And then the black and white version of it. And the black and white isn't as stunning as the color print, but it still works. All the detail can be seen if you close in and look at this print closely. It's easier to see the separation of tones when it's in color, obviously. So black and white is a real challenge. That's why I said this is kind of like the culmination of everything I'm trying to teach and how to use film masking. And then here's an interesting one. This is shot in color, but it's printed muted because it's such a foggy day and it's a great shot. This is like probably my favorite image that Anne had made. And when I made a black and white, it looks almost identical because they're both almost black. The color is almost black and white. The real challenge here was making a negative that's clean, so there's no dust. Because if you have dust on your negative when you're making it, then it'll print black because the dust is blocking exposure. And if you have black specks in here, then it's a lot of retouching to get rid of. So I think I made this neg 3 times in order to get one that was clean enough. And then this here is the crater of a volcano, huge volcano in Hawaii. Bob Cameron was hovering above this. And from that transparency, I made a negative, and I made this black and white print. So you can see how dramatic the sky is here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because if you were to shoot in black and white, if Bob had shot original black and white film, he used an orange or red filter, he would darken the blue in order to get separation between the clouds. But to get this kind of separation, film masking did that. So you have more control, and especially when you incorporate filters in masking, you can still use filters. This one is Yarlung Zangbo River in Tibet, and just the blues against that brown mountain in the foreground to get it to separate. I increased the local contrast. And again, if you were simply to convert it to black and white, it wouldn't look like that. Matter of fact, it didn't look like that when she shot it. It looks more like this. But this is what you do as a black and white photographer. You interpret the scene in front of you, and depending on how you expose it, process it, you interpret color tones. The black, this is Chicago. Bob wanted to use this as the cover of I Love Chicago, but his publisher didn't want to use it. I thought it was great. You can see the Sears Tower, Chicago sky, and then again, getting the clouds to separate from that blue sky. You use a filter when making the mask, or even making a negative. You can filter. Generally speaking, I don't like to use filters when I'm shooting original black and white film. It's too dramatic. It's a real give and take. When you darken the sky, you also darken the shadow, because a lot of shadows are blue. So if you darken a blue sky, you're going to lose shadow detail. So I don't like using filters when I shoot. But when you're using filters when you mask, it's much more gentle. It's not as dramatic. You can still get this good separation here, which you would suffer from if you had shot original black and white film with a filter. Instead of coming down to the end of this. This is skies over Hawaii after a storm. Kind of golden here. A lot of blues. This mountain here coming out of the fog. It's clearly visible in color here. a real challenge when you make a black and white. So this has more drama to it. But again, this contrast is greater here than here. And actually that takes specialized masking, but it'll make more sense at the end of this lesson, I think. And there's good separation between the mountain here and the water. Here's another one. This one, perhaps the color works better than the black and white. But it's also, this is the Transamerica Pyramid coming through the clouds. And there's a little bit of color here. Actually, it was a challenge to make this so neutral. Original transparency doesn't have such good color as this. But that little bit of color, which is kind of like a warm, slightly warm brown, works better than the black and white. Although the black and white is nice too. That's an example of where the color really adds that. It helps to separate the subject. This one too, the colors, this is rather dramatic. Bob called this cocktail time, because I think he had a cocktail every day. But the fog rolling over the city with the Bay Bridge in the background, and there's a Transamerica Pyramid. And converting this to black and white, it's very nostalgic when it's in black and white. Actually, you can see 76 here. That gas station is gone now, so you can tell this picture, this original was shot in the 70s. And here's one of the. I should zoom in on this. This is the fog rolling in over Carmel, Big Sur, I think. And I don't know how well this is going to pick up that. The detail in that mountain, the foliage, I mean, it's just a pretty dark green against some, as the hills dip in, you can see dark areas there, and that was a real challenge. This one, actually I like this one a lot. This is printed, and I subsequently printed this again. I made a bigger one because I like this image a lot. The clouds rolling in, the sky, the feeling is much stronger in the black and white print. So this is one where I really like the black and white quite a bit better. I actually have the big one on the wall here. I made it 20 by 24. And then this one here, this is back to Annie's picture. It's a shot of a rice. These are rice stacks drying in the sun. These two buildings were built by a Chinese gentleman who went to California. He was one of the few people that made a lot of money. And he came back to China, he had that built. So it's, the building obviously has American influences in how they didn't build buildings like that in China at that time. And two sisters inherited those buildings. And then the black and white, again, has a very different feeling. It's almost haunted. It feels like the building's haunted or something. So that's that. And then this here is the fog rolling over a city. And again, this works very well. I mean, there's quite a bit of detail here. And although it's dark, because it's in color, you accept the different shades because the color helps to separate all the foreground from the mid to the back. And even though it's dark, it works very well. And when I made the black and white, I had to lighten this. I wouldn't have been able to make the print work if I had kept that area as dark. And so the mask was concentrated on separating these buildings from one another. So the mask, you have to get it to a certain point and stop. The next stage mask separates that where you stopped from what's next on that gray scale. So that's okay. So those are the examples. Now, I think, yeah. Now I'm gonna have to get the camera back over there. Okay, so I thought I would show you a couple of originals. This is the original, you can see, of that fog rolling the city. So in here it is pretty dark, but that's typical of transparency material. If you overexpose transparency, it goes light and there's no detail. So it's more common to underexpose rather than overexpose. And here's the original of the fog. Again, it's the detail is there, but and another thing is these are Ektachrome. Bob shot mostly Ektachrome.